Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's SCORE Fairfield County webinar entitled Getting Control of Your Costs and Your Business. I'm Steve Smith, the webinar coordinator at SCORE Fairfield County and a business mentor here as well. Our presenter today is our old friend. He's actually not very old, but our friend Cliff Ennico. And I've introduced him many times. I'll do that more formally in just a minute. First, I'm going to talk to you for a second, like I always do on these webinar introductions, about SCORE. And some of you I can see from the names of people who signed up are old hands at this, so I apologize if it's redundant, but here we go. So SCORE is a department of the U.S. Small Business Administration. It was founded in the 1960s. We have, on a nationwide basis, over 320 offices and 11,000 volunteers. In SCORE Fairfield County, our office is located at 111 East Avenue in Norwalk, and we have 100 volunteers with various, actually 110 volunteers with various degrees of industry, process, expertise, and subject matters that range all across the lot. We do a series of workshops and webinars. We do about 125 to 130 workshops per year, usually at library venues throughout Fairfield County. And we also do webinars, and you're on one. So you know pretty much about the webinar program. We do them twice per month, actually this month, because the first Tuesday is the day we do them. The first Tuesday is the first of the month. We're actually going to do 3, and I'll get back to that in a minute. We also do one-on-one counseling at our offices at 111 East Avenue in Norwalk, where you can sit down with an individual or individuals and discuss in detail the issues that are facing your business. That's extremely popular. Probably our flagship event, actually. Our next webinar is August 15th, and the subject will be New Things Digital. And look for the specifics. In fact, you've gotten a marketing blurb on this already, but look for the specifics at fairfieldcounty.score.org. In fact, anything you want to know about SCORE in Fairfield County, go to that website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. And you'll be getting another reminder on that webinar 2 days prior. So for today's webinar, we're going to end sharply at 1 o'clock, and important because I always get questions on this. Yes, the webinar is being recorded, and by the end of the day, you'll be able to go to fairfieldcounty.score.org to listen to and see the slides for that presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them in the chat window at the lower left portion of the screen, as you can see it there. In fact, some are on right now. It appears that maybe the sound is not coming through. I don't know. If anyone can hear me, would you send a chat to me? I have several that are saying they can't, but I'm just wondering. Okay, so Suzanne says she can hear me. So that means, okay, so most people can hear me. So okay, good. Okay, Kathleen, I recognize you. Thank you very much for that. So I'm not going to go back and do that over again. I'm just going to move on from here. We do have time for Cliff's questions at the end, as usual. And it's also an important point, and some of you have already experienced this, but at the conclusion of today's webinar, you will be receiving an email asking you to evaluate the quality of the webinar. We really appreciate that input, and we really do read it and try to take action to the best of our ability. Now, our speaker, Cliff, who many of you have heard before, either on webinars or in person at libraries around Fairfield County, is a nationally recognized small business legal and tax expert. He's best known for being the first reality TV show and host Money Hunt, which was a PBS series that he was the host of. He has a weekly business advice column called Succeeding in Your Business. It appears in dozens of major newspapers and other small business websites. Cliff's an attorney and small business consultant, and he's based in Fairfield, Connecticut. He's helped launch over 15,000 businesses, and he's the author of 16 books. He's also a frequent speaker at our workshops and webinars, as I mentioned, and really has tremendous expertise in the whole field of running and starting a small business. So I'm going to turn it over to Cliff now, and he'll take you through today's topic, getting control of your costs and your business, and then about 1:45 or 1:50, we'll switch back and we'll try to do answer some questions. Okay, so thank you very much, and Cliff, take it away.
Hey, thank you, Steve, and thank you to everybody who's taking time out of a busy day to talk to me. And to hear a little bit about what may seem like a pretty dull topic at first, but I'll try to make it as interesting as I possibly can. First of all, before we begin, I want to ask a couple of questions of the audience, which I think I know the answers to already, but I want to ask them up front. First of all, do we have any members of Congress on the phone, on the call right now? Anybody, representatives, senators, anybody like that? If so, would you please? Thank you. Somebody just texted in no. That's good. That's good. Any state governors was my next question. Any governor of the states? I find these days that when it comes to finances, there are two types of states in the United States today. Virtually all the states are financially bankrupt, but there are some that are morally bankrupt as well. You probably know, if you live in such a state, you definitely know what those are. The reason why I'm asking these silly questions, by the way, and if any members of Congress or any state governors are listening to this program, maybe during the replay later on, you really need this information, okay? Let's just say it right off the bat. Cutting costs is something that you guys are not good at, okay? It's something you need to get better on. So anyway, end of paid political announcement, actually unpaid political announcement. Let us get started. And by the way, the jokes get worse as the program gets on, but if you've heard me do these before, you know how that is. Obviously, now you know that I am a lawyer by training. These are the disclaimers. And basically, there really only are two things you need to know here. Number one is that while I have a long-standing relationship with SCORE, I've been doing these programs now for, 35 years now. It's hard to believe. But I am not officially employed by SCORE. I have no official relationship with them. Anything I talk about is strictly me. If you ever listen to one of these programs and you take my advice and something goes wrong and you lose your house and your spouse divorces you and your dog pees on your leg and you end up living in a diaper box under the Brooklyn Bridge, it's absolutely nothing to do with SCORE. Also, I'm a lawyer, so you really can't sue me either. So there. The second thing is, and this is really the more important one, is that while I will try to answer your questions as best I can at the end of this program, there's a very big difference between giving out information and giving advice. It's a very big difference between saying, this is what the law says to this is what you should do. In these programs, while I'm going to give out a lot of general information, I'm really not in a position to give any of you one-on-one advice. This is what you should do in this situation. For that, you'd have to call me and retain me and maybe pay a little bit of money, not too much, but enough, for me to get to know you better and know the circumstances of your individual situation enough so I can give you advice. So just be aware of that. This is not really advice you can rely on. That can only be given by a lawyer, accountant, or other professional who is licensed to practice in your state. So enough with preliminaries. Let's get going. We lawyers love to make hairline distinctions. We do. One of the things you do in law school, you spend a lot of time looking at two words that most people think mean exactly the same thing and highlighting the subtle differences between them. One of the first things I learned in law school is that there's a very big difference between something being simple and something being easy. Now, we tend to use those two words as if they were synonyms, something's easy, something simple. But they really are not the same. Something that is very simple to understand conceptually can be very difficult to do in practice. And likewise, something that's easy to do may often take years to learn how to do. People, I have this conversation with my clients all the time. Cliff, it only took you, 20 minutes to do my LLC. Why are you billing me this much? And my answer is always, well, it took me 20 years of my life to learn how to do LLCs in 20 minutes. If you had to do it yourself, I bet you it would take a lot longer. So there's a very big difference between something being easy and something being simple. Growing a business is something that's very simple, but it's not easy. It's actually very easy to understand. There are two ways, and only two, to grow a business. I don't care what kind of business it is, what vertical you're in, service, retail, publishing, manufacturing, whatever, high tech. There's only two ways to grow a business. You either raise your revenues or you lower your costs. That's it. All of management, all of every MBA program that you ever take can be boiled down to four simple words: maximize revenue, minimize cost. That's it. That's all management is about. Okay, questions? Okay, obviously we're going to be doing a lot more than that, but it really is that simple to understand. Now, of course, all of you on this call can testify that this is not easy to do. Okay, it is not easy, but it's very simple to understand. It really is that simple. Let's talk about revenue just for a minute. That's not what this program is about, but there are only two ways to raise revenue. If you decide, I really need more money out of my business, I need to get more income, more revenue, there's only two ways to do that. Revenue, by definition, if you ever took a basic accounting course in your school years, is the number, at any given time, your revenue is the number of things you sell multiplied by the price per thing. So if I sell 10 cans of beans at $10 a piece, I live in Connecticut, so it probably would cost that much. My revenue is $100, 10 times 10. If I do 5 LLCs at $1,000 a piece, my revenue is $5,000. The math is really that simple when it comes to growing your gross revenue. Obviously, this is pre-tax, pre-expenses, your gross revenue in a business. That tells you that there's only two ways that you can raise revenue. You can either increase your prices, if you can get away with that, if your market will stand that, or sell more stuff, find new markets, find more uses. All of us have a box of Arm & Hammer baking soda in our houses. And what was Arm & Hammer baking soda first made for? What was it first intended as a product to do when it was first manufactured in I think it's the 1870s, 1880s. It's been around that long, probably a little later. What was Arm & Hammer baking soda intended for? Well, I'll give you a hint. The word baking appears in the title. So I'll bet you money that most people were using it to bake things, bake cakes, bake pies, whatever. It was a baker's solution, right? Well, I don't know about you. I'm not a baker. I'm not a dessert guy very much. But I would suspect that for most of us, it would be very difficult to bake a cake or a pie using just Arm & Hammer baking soda. That is not why we have a box of Arm & Hammer baking soda in our house. Where is it? Where is that box of baking soda? Answer, it's in our refrigerator. Because somebody along the way discovered that Arm & Hammer baking soda was a very effective way to deodorize your refrigerator. When refrigerators first came out in the 20s and 30s, 1920s, 1930s, somebody, I don't know who, discovered this, and it created a whole new use for these products. There's an international market for your stuff. You can grow that way. Maybe there are new uses for your stuff. People are using your products in a different way. I find that a lot of people like to use my books as doorstops. For example, I do have noticed that. I go to sometimes a friend's house, and they actually got one of my books holding a door open. So, that's why I make them so long, and we use a very sturdy paper stock. I'm only kidding, of course, but that's, this is what you do. When you see people using your product in a different way than you thought they should be using it, that's a sign that there's a big market out there that's untapped, and you should explore that. Those are the only two ways to raise revenue. You can increase your prices or simply sell more stuff, find new markets for whatever it is, your products or services that you sell. But that isn't always possible. In a highly competitive market or a market that's saturated, it is tough to raise revenue. And I'm in that boat myself. I'm a lawyer. I'm here in Fairfield County, Connecticut. There are millions of lawyers in Connecticut. I don't think I'm exaggerating about that. You can't throw a rock in any town in Connecticut without hitting at least two of them. And by the way, I don't recommend you do that in any way. Even though you may not like our profession very much, try to hold back on the violence and the hate. But seriously, it's I'm in a situation where every lawyer charges exactly the same for everything. If you want a will done, a simple will done, it's $500. If you want an LLC done, it's $500 plus expense. Everybody charges exactly the same. If I try to raise my prices $10, I won't make more money. I can't do it. The market is simply too saturated for that. Also, too, I can't really find new markets for it. I can't really look you straight in the face and say that my LLCs are better than the attorney down the street. We all use the same templates. We all use the same forms. I mean, if you go to 10 lawyers and ask them to form an LLC for you, I guarantee you will get 10 almost identical sets of documents back from each of these people because we all do it the same way. Mine are no better than anybody else's, although my autograph might be worth a little something someday on eBay, but, from my mouth to God's ears. Anyway, that might be the only differentiator is that, Cliff Ennico did your LLC. I hope that someday I'll be able to charge more for that, but today I won't be able to. So in a market like that, where you cannot grow revenue, where there's a real hard ceiling there that you cannot break through, the only way to grow your business is to cut costs, to reduce them, get them as low as possible, and get that gross margin as high as you possibly can get. In a cutthroat marketplace or a deep recession, the lowest cost provider is the most likely to survive. Now, that's not a guarantee. Even sometimes the lowest cost provider goes under. But, in tough times, and sooner or later there will be tough times again. I can't tell you when. My crystal ball's no better than anybody on this call. But when that happens, you want to make sure that you are the low-cost provider. People will be pinching pennies, and they will still shop from the person who has managed their costs to the point that they are giving their customers the best possible deal that they can. You want to be that person. So how do we do it? In my experience, controlling costs is a three-step process. First, you have to understand your costs. You cannot manage what you do not know. So the first thing we have to do is to understand what your costs are. How much are you spending on things? Getting on top of them and knowing what they are. That's step number one. Step number two is identifying the essential expenses. These are the things you do not cut. These are the things that, frankly, in a bad economy, in a recession, you may want to increase your spending on these, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Then step number three, cut the non-essential expenses ruthlessly. Ruthlessly. That word is an ugly word. A lot of people don't like it, but it's the key to cutting costs. And it's one of the reasons why politicians have such a difficult time cutting costs when it comes time to do the state or the federal or the local government budget. That's why it's so hard. People get attached to every line item on the local budget. Every line item has a constituency of some kind, and the politicians are afraid of losing votes if they cut the darn thing. So this is why it's so hard for government officials to cut costs. We'll talk about that. But a ruthless approach to cost cutting is the key here, and I will help you with that. Those of you who are interested, by the way, I do have a YouTube video. I do have a YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com and type in Cliff Ennico. I always go by Cliff, never Clifford. Ennico is my last name. You will see about 38 videos that I've done, some for SCORE, some for other organizations that I've done. Some are more legal than others. But the one video that you want is a video where I talk about the 3 personality traits that every successful entrepreneur must develop. I think that's actually the title of it. Search for the words personality traits, and I think you'll get to the right one. This is an hour-long lecture where I talk about the need to be ruthless, among other things, in business. There's a lot about ruthlessness in there, and it's not what you think it is. It's not about being unethical or sleazy or beating up people with a baseball bat. It's a more subtle concept than that. I will leave you to listen to the video. Anyway, let's take each of these 3 steps in turn. First of all, understanding your costs. You cannot manage what you do not know. Most businesses, to be quite honest, don't do a very good job of this. People don't have the time for it. After a 12 to 14-hour day of doing whatever it is you do, marketing, all that stuff, the last thing in the world you want to do is update your books. But it's something that you do have to do on a regular basis, because if you don't do it, you don't see when your spending is getting out of control. You need to monitor your spending on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. Try to do it daily if you can. Monthly, frankly, for most businesses is probably not enough. For a service business, that's probably maybe about right, but weekly is my recommendation. Every week on a Saturday or Sunday or on a Friday night before you disappear for the weekend, take a minute out, update your books as to how much you spent that week, and really look at those numbers very closely. Where is your money actually going? You'd be surprised to see how much of your money goes to different kinds of things. But if you don't do this on a regular basis, you will not see it. Are there seasonal or other fluctuations in your spending? Do you spend more money on ice at certain times of the year than others? I mean, this is something you need to know. A lot of it's common sense, but a lot of it isn't. You may find that at certain times of the year or at certain times of the month, you are spending more on certain things than others, and that's good information to know. There's a reason for that, and you have to figure out what that reason is. Here's the key to me. The more detailed, the better. A lot of people get lazy here when they do a spreadsheet and they try to figure out what their expenses are. They lump too many things together in categories. And my philosophy is you need to break it out further than that. Break it out down to as much detail as you can. How much are you spending on office supplies? Well, if you've got 60 different kinds of office supplies, you're not getting the information you need. You need to break it down further. How much are you spending on toilet paper? How much are you spending on paper clips? How much are you spending on software? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you have to break it down to each individual expenditure. Then the information becomes overwhelming. But most people do a very poor job, and watch out for the miscellaneous category. Look out for that, because that's a dangerous thing. Many times whenever I see a company that has a lot of expenses in the miscellaneous category, I nail the client on that. You need to break that down further. I need to know better what is going into that category. Very often it's stuff that shouldn't be lumped in. That should be a separate line item for that specific thing. The more detailed you can go, the deeper you can drill down, the more granular you can be with this, the better off you are. And all we're talking about is a very simple spreadsheet, by the way. What you want to do is you want to put together, it's basically an income statement. Most people focus on the revenue side, how much money is coming in, from clients, how much is coming in from webinars, how much is coming in from other things. But you really need to drill down on the expenses too, and really, really break it down, not just by general category, but by specific expenses. You learn an awful lot this way. No, really. In fact, the toilet paper thing, let me just tell you, years ago, I had a client who did this exercise. I gave him a series of exercises, and he discovered that his expenses for toilet paper were going up on a weekly basis. He was buying more toilet paper, over and over time. Now, this was a garage that had 3 employees, so he sat down with each of his employees, and one of them told him, he goes, well, I'm kind of embarrassed to talk about this, but I was down in Central America. I took a vacation. I went down there, and ever since I came back here, I just find I'm going to the bathroom a lot. And I apologize. It's not affecting my work. I'm just a little. And so, the boss basically said to him, dude, you really ought to go to a doctor. And he did, and the employee, it turned out, had an illness, a worm condition that he had picked up in Central America that would not have come to light. This worker probably would have died if this employer had not done this research and figured out that the toilet paper expenses were going through the roof. One of this guy was going to the bathroom like 5-6 times a day. Seriously, you laugh about stuff like that, but good things can come from this exercise too. But this is also a way that you can find out if people are ripping you off. Dude, we seem to be spending a lot of money on paper clips. This is a garage. We use paper clips, but we're not an office. We don't really need that much. And by the way, I just checked online. Why is your Facebook page Paper Clips Are Us? what's going on here? I mean, this is how you can tell if employees are ripping you off. If you see expenses, why are we spending so much on paper clips? We're not an office business. Why are we doing that? It raises questions in your mind that you need to get the answers to. It's really simple to look at your expenses, look at your bank statements, credit card statements. If you use PayPal or other online payment systems, look at your monthly statements there. That's and try to get as granular as you possibly can. That's the message here. Sometimes it's a little thing that will tip you off to a big problem that you are having in your business as well. It also points out to the things you're spending too much money on. If you pay for things by cash, some businesses are like that. Make sure you get detailed receipts. Obviously, if you go to an Office Max or a Staples or someplace like that, you get an itemized, thing. When you go to a BJ's Warehouse or a Costco, you might not get that same level of detail. Don't be afraid. When you buy stuff, when you get home, turn the receipt over and just write on the back, $8 for toilet paper, $9 for paper towels, whatever it was. Just write it down while it's fresh in your mind before you forget it. That information will help you get to the level of granularity that you think. I will share with you, by the way, that I actually did this exercise. I mean, I do it frequently, but last year I did this exercise, and I learned something very important. Just to give you an idea of what you're looking for here. When I did my expenses and I really got granular with it, I really get down to things, I discovered that I was spending almost $500 a year on software products for my computer that I wasn't using. When you sign up for a software product online, you automatically sign up for automatic updates and they automatically bill your credit card whenever it comes up for renewal. When you update your computer and you do away with software programs, those annual fees, they're usually not that much. It's $20 here, $30 there, but they add up. And I discovered that I was spending more than $500 a year on software programs that I was no longer using, that I had either deleted from my computer, or when I upgraded my computer, they gave me something entirely new. I wasn't using the same antivirus program I was using before. So I actually called up, went and called up the toll-free numbers. And it took me the better part of a day, but I was able to cut all of those expenses with a few phone calls. I had to, sometimes wait online and listen to horrible music, but I was able to get to someone who was able to terminate my account, and I was able to save $500 a year just by doing that. If you don't know what's going on, those automatic recurring expenses can be a problem. Always look for those, by the way. Whenever you sign up for an automatic, charge my account every year when the thing comes due for renewal, whenever you do that online, make sure you make a note of it somewhere so that if you stop using the thing, you can cut those losses. Otherwise, they will keep charging your card every month, every year, whatever. Okay, so that's the key. If you don't know your costs, you have no ability to manage them. Now, step 2 is identifying the essential expenses. Okay, how do I define essential expenses? Very simple. If these don't get paid, you must shut your doors if something happens. So some examples, different businesses will have different essential expenses, but suppliers of key ingredients or parts, web access fees. If you're an online business, you're selling on eBay and Amazon, the monthly eBay page for your eBay store is an essential fee. The fees that Amazon charges are examples of essentials fees. If you're a lawyer or another professional, maintaining whatever you have to do to maintain your license. So, for example, in New York, I have to attend 24 hours of continuing education. Yes, Cliff Ennico has to sit in a classroom and listen to someone else tell him something that he already knows. But I have to do that for 24 hours a year, or else I cannot renew my license and to practice law in New York State. So I make sure that gets done. Taxes, obviously, are essential expenses. You don't pay your taxes, you wear an orange jumpsuit, and no business is ever worth that. The key, if you've been in business long enough, you kind of know in your gut what your essential expenses are. But there are two points that I want to make about this. First of all, some essential expenses are not obvious. So, for example, marketing, advertising, promotion. The biggest mistake that small businesses make when it comes to cost cutting is when when we get into a recession, when we get into a bad economy, when the market turns down, what's the first thing that most small businesses cut? They cut back on their marketing. They see that as a luxury. And I got to say, that is very short-sighted. And in many cases, it's wrong. That is not a luxury. That is not gravy. That is protein. This, as I've said before in these programs, and you'll hear me say it until I'm blue in the face because it's so true, the key to success in any small business, whatever it is marketing. If you do not market yourself aggressively, successfully, often, you will fail. It's all about getting the word out. It's all about making sure that people know you, people remember you, that you're constantly in people's minds. That is essential. That is not a luxury. That is something that must be done. And in difficult times, in tough economies, you may have to actually spend more on marketing than you do during a good economy when the money's just flowing in and people have you on their radar screens. You may have to work harder to stand out in a tough economy when people are pinching their pennies. Doing this well may mean the difference between success and failure. Also, too, you may have to change your business model. I mean, it's no secret that in tough economies, you may have to change the way you do business. And if that's the case, you got to market the hell out of that. Now doing whatever it is, now doing Honda transmissions. We used to be just Toyotas, but now we're going to start doing Hondas. You got to have to market that because people don't think of you as doing Honda repairs. So you have to be the one to get out there and really tell. You're going to have to actually increase your spending on marketing in tough times to survive. That is not an obvious. That is not a luxury expense, and for many small businesses. So that's one. Legal, accounting, and professional fees. I very often am a judge on business plan competitions around the country. These are usually college or university events where students have teams, they work together, and then they submit their business plan, kind of like Shark Tank or my old Money Hunt show. And there's a panel of very cynical judges, and I'm one of the. I love doing these because I'm the Simon Cowell. I'm a lawyer. Nobody likes me anyway, so I have nothing to lose by making snarky comments about the business plan. Is this really going to work? That kind of stuff. I like to see people sweat when they do these things, and inevitably when they do the slide for the cost projections, well, here's how much we think it's going to cost us for the first 6 months, the first 12 months, the first 18 months of operating expenses. The one thing they always forget to put in is legal, accounting, and professional fees. Well, dude, how are you going to organize? We're going to form an LLC. How are you going to do that? You're going to do it on LegalZoom. Well, you realize, of course, they get a lot of things wrong on LegalZoom. Really? Yeah, they don't do a perfect job of that. You still need a lawyer. How about, someone threatens to sue you or a customer, somebody slips and falls? Well, we're not budgeting for that. Well, you got to budget for that. Things like that happen. You may have to spend money on lawyers and on accountants and other types of professionals. I had a client that was looking to do a very interesting type of facility in New York City. And this person did not know that she needed to hire a contractor to do the build-out. She thought she could just do it. Her designer would do all that stuff for you. No, you need somebody who needs to know the difference between a hammer and a screwdriver. You really need that person. That's not your designer usually. The designer is very good at showing what the space is going to look like and getting everybody excited and visualizing it and all, but you need someone who can actually put the bloody thing up and make sure that it will stand up. One of the biggest problems they're having right now, Frank Lloyd Wright, the famous architect, everybody knows who he was. I mean, one of the most creative architects who ever lived. I mean, if you've ever seen any of his buildings up close and personal, they look like nothing else you've ever seen before. I mean, the guy was just absolutely brilliant, but he had one major weakness. He didn't really understand much about building materials and how they work and what the stresses are. So seriously, and you can look this up online, I'm not just making this up, most of his buildings are now under constant repair because the materials are wearing out. He was very fond, for example, of doing things that project out over empty space and stuff like that. Well, there are only certain types of concrete that will stay out there, defying gravity for 50 years. He wasn't too good about that. He knew how it was supposed to look, and it looked fantastic, but the thing wasn't very practically well constructed. So you need to have a contractor. Even if you yourself have some knowledge of the construction trades. You are not a developer. You are not that person. Get somebody involved. Legal, accounting, professional fees are not a luxury. Especially in tough times where you're much more likely to get sued, to be audited by the IRS. Like it or not, you're going to have to budget for that stuff. You may have to actually increase them in tough times. But now I'm going to contradict myself. On the other hand, don't you love the way lawyers do this all the way? On the one hand, this; on the other hand, that. I'm as guilty of that as most members of my profession. I'm sorry to say. But on the other hand, not everything is an essential expense. If you go through your list and you find up with 15 to 20 essential expenses, you got too many in there. In my experiences, only a handful of expenses are actually essential. Only a handful. There are only a few things you actually have to spend money on every month. Everything else, there's usually some fat there. There's usually some padding. You could probably cut every one of those other things by 20, 30% and not suffer too much. You really don't. I mean, let's face it, your daily cup of coffee. Okay, now let's face it. I have to say, I'm going to be very honest. I'm not a morning person. I find I need that caffeine jolt in the morning. I do. For me to function anytime before 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, I absolutely have to have that cup of coffee. But I don't need a double macchiato or anything like that. I mean, plain black, instant coffee, Keurig out of the pot. I'm cool with that. I can do with that. The one thing, though, now on the other hand, though, when we're talking scotch, however, that is an expense that I actually view as an essential expense in my practice. And there I do find there is a very big difference between Dewar's and single malt. Okay, so that is, I consider that more in the essential expense category. I don't have much of a taste for blended scotch, but a good single malt I can really appreciate. But seriously, imagine cutting an expense to zero. They're back in the 80s, the government actually tried this for a while. They called it zero-based budgeting. If they took a line item on a budget and just cut it to zero, didn't spend any money on it whatsoever, what would happen? What would the downside be? Would that agency, whatever, not be able to function? It was a very useful exercise. Unfortunately, they stopped doing it when the 90s came around. But it's a very good exercise for you to do. If you're really not sure, cut an expense to zero. What would happen? What would happen if you just stopped drinking coffee altogether and stopped spending $6, $7 a day on a macchiato? What would happen? All right, you might be a little slower waking up in the morning. You will definitely go through some kind of withdrawal. Anybody who's ever, drunk 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day who stops cold turkey, seriously, that is withdrawal system. You know what an addict goes through when they stop taking whatever drug they're on. It's amazing what happens with that. You're going to have headaches for a few days. But what would happen? Ask yourself that question. Your essential expenses should only be 4, 5, 6 at the most. Anything more than that, I would question whether they're really essential. I think you probably have some fat in there that you can cut. Now let's talk about the hard part, the reason why so many cost-cutting plans do. The first 2 rules are pretty simple, but the third one can be tough. Eliminating the non-essential expenses. Once you've established the essential expenses and you budgeted for them, now you got to cut everything else on that list. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this, folks. It is one of the hardest things you will ever do in your life. It is one of the hardest things. Think of those poor politicians. I'm not saying you should sympathize with politicians, by the way, but in this one area, I do feel for them a little bit. I would have a hard time being a politician in a situation like this because whenever they talk about, well, we're going to cut costs, we're going to cut expenses, we're going to make smaller government, they talk about it, but then when you actually look at the list, you realize, holy cow, we need to cut funding to that nursing home, but wait a minute, my cousin has a mother that's in that nursing home. We can't cut that budget. That'll put her out on the street. That's what happens. And you're seeing it, by the way, in what's going on with Congress, too. Whenever they look at cutting, Medicare and all this stuff, well, then exactly, and then all the politicians go home and all their constituents come up, wait a minute, I got a mother who depends on Medicaid. If you cut that, we got a problem. I'm going to have to put her in my basement. It's hard to do. Every line item on a government budget has some kind of constituency that's going to be unhappy if you cut it. And politicians do not like making people unhappy. They know that's how they don't get reelected. And that's a politician's biggest fear is not getting reelected. You don't get reelected if you make people unhappy. That's why it's so hard for these people to cut costs. I feel their pain. I really do. And I mean that absolutely sincerely. No irony, no snark here. I really do feel their pain. It requires a certain amount of ruthlessness, not caring, about that. Do it and then get on with your life. Ask anyone who's ever served in a combat zone in the military, and they know what this is all about. You can still be a good person and still do some ruthless things when it's necessary to save your business. So here are some examples. If you are, practicing law or some other profession, why do you still have a brick and mortar office in 2017? Is that really necessary? You can work very effectively out of the home and cut your biggest expense right there. When I first started practicing law back in the early 90s, I was known affectionately for a while as the diner lawyer of Fairfield County because I always met my clients in diners. If they had an office, I would meet them there. I work out of my home most of the time. I never see clients in the home. That is, by the way, the first rule of working out of a home office. You never see clients in the home. You always meet them somewhere else. It will not only help you build your business and get you out of the house periodically, but it will also save your marriage too. I have another program on my YouTube channel called Working Out of a Home Office. For those of you who are interested, I have a whole hour and a half on some of the do's and don'ts of working out of a home office. Just go to my youtube.com and then search for Cliff Ennico, and you'll see all the stuff that I have up there. You can cut your expenses very effectively by doing that, without losing clients. Most clients understand these days that, real estate is very expensive, especially in very high income areas. In where I am in Fairfield County, it can be as much as $80, $90 a square foot. That is money I can save right there by just working out of a house. Underperforming employees, and this is so sad because you like them. Here's Murphy's Law when it comes to employees. Your worst employee is the one you really like. That's Murphy's Law, and I could do a whole course on that, by the way. The employee that's just, can't get out of his own way. He's constantly making mistakes. He's constantly screwing around, but he's such a nice person. It's so hard to cut him and put him out on the street. There's another example where you need to be ruthless. And here's Cliff Ennico's rule. I actually do tax programs where I talk about this. Every once in a while, someone will come to me, what are the tough deductions? What are the things that the IRS really focuses on when they do audits? Here's Cliff Ennico's rule, okay? The more enjoyable and fun an activity is, the less likely it is to be deductible on your taxes. So you go to Spain for a week and you spend a day in a conference, but you spend the rest of the time driving around Spain, sampling wine, olives, oil, doing whatever the heck you do in Spain, watch a flamenco performance. That is not deductible. The only part that's deductible is the time you're actually spent sitting on your butt in the conference, and it must have something directly to do with your business, and yet everybody tries to deduct the entire conference. Generally speaking, people do not pay you to do things that are fun. The more fun an activity is, it's probably something that's not driving revenue to your bottom line, and it's something that probably should be cut. I know that sounds a little bit cynical, but if you look at some of my other videos on YouTube, you'll see that it is really the truth. I think I have time to do this here, but here's the key. Picture the IRS auditor. Picture the person who is looking at your tax return. You do your tax return, you file it. What does this person look like? Well, they probably work in a cubicle in the basement of some very large government facility somewhere in the Midwest, somewhere probably in Iowa or someplace like that, or Kansas. It's this big giant room the size of several football fields. There are thousands of people working in cubicles, and all they're doing is looking at returns, looking at returns, looking at returns. Describe this person to me. What are they like? What kind of life do you think these people have? Probably they're not having a whole lot of fun out of life. This is probably one of the more boring, although it's a steady job. Government jobs usually are, but it's probably one of the dullest, most boring ways you can think of to earn a living. So picture this person who's, making just a little bit above government scale, perhaps, and they're looking at return, and they see your return, and you're deducting all these wonderful trips to conferences and exotic locales, and you have a yacht, and you're deducting the expenses because you entertain clients on board your yacht. How is this person looking at you? Answer, they hate you. They don't like you. They are very jealous of your lifestyle, and being human, they're going to want to get even. you're going to get your butt audited, people. This 1% son of a gun, we got to bring him down. He's having too much fun. Seriously, one of the keys to avoiding an IRS audit is don't deduct a lot of stuff that's fun that's going to get the IRS people jealous. I hate that sounds cynical, but it is so true. Watch out for the entertainment and the travel. That's where the small business auditors really bring out the baseball bats. What you want to do is you want to let the IRS person know that your life is as much of a misery as theirs is. You are having as little fun as they are doing what they do for a living. If you do that successfully, you will probably never get audited. Sounds cynical, I know, but try it. It works. Lastly, it is tough to do because cost cutting may have unpleasant consequences. You may have to do more yourself. By cutting your employees, well, that means that you may have to go in and make the smoothies in the morning, which John used to do, but you fired John. So you got to do more. You have to take on more of the burden of the day-to-day stuff yourself. You may have to move the business. You may have to decide that it's simply too expensive to be running that kind of a business in the state or the locality where you are. You may have to move the business, or you may have to move. Whenever I have to hire a plumber to work on my house, I always ask them where they live. And they never live locally. They never live in the community where I live. Why? Because it's too expensive for them. They live someplace in upstate Connecticut and somewhere in the farm country where they have to drive an hour and a half to get to work in the morning, but this is what they have to do to stay cash flow positive. Lastly, you may have to change your model radically. Doing this, you may begin to realize there is absolutely no way that I can run this business profitably and still, and I just simply can't cut anymore. I'm cutting bone, and I'm still not making ends meet. Maybe you're just in the wrong business. Maybe you have to radically change your model to one that's more profitable. I've had clients who've been in that situation. It's not pleasant, but better to know it than to live in a fantasy world and stick your head in the sand and ignore it. But here's my last message. Whenever you're cutting costs ruthlessly, don't overdo it. Again, on the other hand, don't overdo it. What happens to a business that cuts its costs too much? Answer, your product, your service quality suffers. And by the way, you may think that when you think of this, you think of manufacturing. Well, gee, duh. If the car manufacturers start making engines out of plastic, they're going to melt when the car goes more than 10 miles an hour. I get that. But even in a service business, that happens too. If I take on too much work, and I bite off more than I can chew, and believe me, there are times in my practice where I've done that, and no matter how late at night I stay up, I simply can't stay on top of it. Clients are upset because their contracts aren't being turned around fast enough, and if I try to speed it up, to make them happier, there's a risk that I might miss something in the contract. I might commit malpractice and get sued or have somebody go after my license. Believe me, I seriously, when you go to the hospital emergency room, would you rather the young surgeon to be at the beginning of his 72-hour shift or at the end of his 72-hour shift? Seriously, the decisions that they're making after 72 hours without sleep are not as good as the ones that they make during the first 10 hours of that. I wonder why they still do that in the medical profession, for example, because it's quite common. I've been in some hospitals where you can tell the young interns are just zombies. I mean, they are just not there. That's all they can do to stay on their feet. You are not getting good care out of these people. I don't care how good they are or how smart they are. After 72 hours awake, you simply are not at your best. I don't know why they do that. But seriously, whenever you cut costs too much, your product, your service quality suffers. There is no such thing as a zero-cost business. Every business has a certain amount of costs, that things you must spend money on if you are to survive in that business. There are a lot of businesses that don't have a lot of expenses involved. If you're cleaning people's houses, and going house to house and cleaning, you have to spend a little bit on supplies and stuff, but mostly your customers supply that, but you still got to pay for the gas in your car to get to each of the houses. And there's no such thing as a zero-cost business. Every business requires a certain amount of investment. There are certain things you have to spend money on. Or as we used to say years ago, when I worked on Wall Street, we used to have a saying on Wall Street, and it really applies to entrepreneurs, especially those of you who are doing tech-type businesses where you're looking to raise outside capital at some point. You can't eat like a bird if you expect to excrete like an elephant. Okay, now we obviously know the word is a little different than what appears in brackets, but you get the concept. If your goal is to have the next Facebook, you can't do that with $1 worth of startup capital. No one can do that. If you expect to come up with the next Facebook, if you're going to do an IPO in 5 to 10 years, you're going to have to put a ton of capital into that sucker to make it work. Do your best cost projections and then triple them. That's probably how much it's going to cost. Certain things. So my point is, cut your costs ruthlessly, but be careful that your quality doesn't suffer. Because if you overdo it, that happens, and that leads to business falling off, and that is not good. You don't want to lose clients because you're too cheap. So let's just wrap it up. Here are the key points. Understand if you want to be an effective cost cutter, understand where every penny goes. Do a spreadsheet and really get granular with this. Find out how much you are spending on paper clips, on toilet paper, every little thing. It's sometimes the smallest things that will give you the greatest insight into where you're spending too much, and also too where your business is starting to have problems. It's a good exercise. If you're not doing it daily, try to do it at least weekly. I don't think monthly is enough anymore, not in these fast-changing, fast-paced times. Number 2, identify the essential expenses that can't be cut, and don't be too generous with this. There are only a handful of expenses that need to be spent in order for a business to be successful. If you find yourself with more than 5, 6, 7 things, you probably got too many things on the list. Keep cutting. Cut everything else ruthlessly. Don't care what the consequences are. Don't worry about it. Do what you must do. You want to be the low-cost provider, but don't put your product quality or professional reputation at risk because you cut too much. If the only way to avoid a malpractice suit is to add an associate, add an associate. Add the associate and take the time necessary to train him or her because that is essential to maintaining your product quality. Work hard at being a low-cost provider. Even in good times. I've been talking a lot about what happens in bad times, but at any given time, you want to be the low-cost provider. In any economy, the low-cost provider is the one most likely to survive. So with that, here are a couple of my best-selling books. The Small Business Survival Guide is a collection of my columns, that Succeeding in Your Business column. By the way, if you're looking for that, you can find it at succeedinginyourbusiness.com. It's an RSS feed. I don't charge for a subscription. And for those of you selling on eBay and Amazon, this is probably the best-selling tax and legal guide for eBay and Amazon sellers available anywhere. And this is what I look like, in case you're curious. And this is where you can find out all about me. So thank you very much for spending time with me. We have a couple of questions here, but I'm going to turn the floor back to Steve here to be our moderator.
Thank you, Cliff. That was great, as usual. And we do have a couple of questions here, and we should be able to cover them all in the 10 minutes we have left or so. Now, the first question is from Vartan Kopian. I hope I said that right. We've had several chats back and forth here in the last hour. His question is this: if you provide a service that costs you $200, say, for example, how much should you charge the customer? In other words, should you consider overhead and G&A and profit, a ratio cost for unseen issues? Is there a rule of thumb, or should you actually do the calculation for each offered item?
Well, this is a good question, Vartan. It's a very big one. It has a lot of parts to it. But I would suggest to you that before you ask this question, there's another question you have to ask first, which is, if you provide a service that costs $200, how should you charge the customer? Not how much, but how should you charge the customer? Should you be charging by the hour? Should you be charging a flat fee? Should you be charging a cost-plus arrangement like many construction people do? There's a number of different ways that you can charge your customer, and without knowing more about the nature of the service, it's tough for me to figure out exactly where you should go there, but I'm assuming that the service does take time, and the time is always your biggest cost of doing any kind of a service business. You always got to make sure that you're being compensated for your time. It isn't just the money you spend on supplies and materials and stuff. See, I don't think your service really costs $200, Vartan. I'll be very honest with you. It costs $200 plus whatever your time costs in getting that job done. Now, see, I'm lucky. I'm in a business where we charge by the hour mostly. I don't always do that. I mostly do flat fees these days. But I'm in a business where I'm constantly mindful of how much my time is worth on an hourly basis. Do this exercise. How much is your time worth on an hourly basis? Look around at other people. Should you be charging, if you had to pay somebody else to do this thing for you, how much would you be willing to pay that person an hour? If it's $30, $40 an hour, that is what your time is probably worth as well, and use that as part of your budgeting. Make sure you recoup the $200, but also factor in your time. If it's a 10-hour job and you're $30 an hour, then you should be doing $3,200. 30 times 10 is $3,000 plus the additional $200. Always make sure that you factor your time in. Now, to answer the question that you actually asked, if you provide a service that costs you, how much should you charge the customer? Well, the short answer is as much as you can, as much as you think you can get away with. Look at what other people are charging. By all means, if you're new to the field, you want to give your clients a little bit of a break, but don't give them too much of a break. One of the biggest mistakes I find that consultants make, especially new ones, people that have worked in corporate America, they got laid off, so now they're running around looking for consulting gigs. The biggest mistake that these people make is they underprice themselves. If you're charging $80 an hour and your nearest competitor is charging $150 an hour, you are giving your clients too good a deal, and you're probably starving yourself, and you're probably going to end up being angry at some point. You're going to start hating your clients at that point. You're going to blame them for something that is really your fault. You're blaming them for not paying more for your service when the real problem is you were simply too afraid to ask for more money for it. My rule of thumb there is that if other people, whatever your nearest competitor is charging, you should be charging 80 to 90% of that, maybe 95%. Don't give your clients too much of a break. Because if you cut your costs too much, by the way, especially in that environment in consulting, two very horrible things are going to happen. First of all, you're going to end up hating your clients, like I said before. But two other things happen as well. There are, first of all, people are going to question whether you're really good or not. Let's say you got a flyer in the mail. There's a local attorney in charge of town who's charging $10 an hour. $10 an hour. Are you going to jump at this? Are you going to say, "Wow, what a great deal! I can get legal services for $10 an hour"? What are you thinking? You're probably thinking, "Wait a minute, who is this guy? Why? This is too good a deal. Something's wrong here." Does this car have an engine that comes with it? Seriously, you're going to start wondering, where did this guy go to prison? Why is he charging $10 an hour? That's just, something's wrong here. That's just too good a deal. In the immortal words of Meatloaf, there ain't no Coupe de Ville hiding at the bottom of a Cracker Jack box. You don't get that kind of a product and that kind of a deal. To show you that I am truly a child of the 1970s. If you ever needed proof of that, you now have proof. But seriously, people are going to question how good you are if you're too cheap. And also, too, there are ruthless people out there who, when they see that you don't really know what you're doing, they'll take advantage of you. They'll say, "Well, Mr. So-and-so, $80, I got to tell you, is really high for this kind of service. I can go anywhere out there and get this for $60, but because you're a nice young man and you're just starting out, I will give you $60 an hour for this service. In the meantime, your nearest competitor is charging $120 an hour. This guy's getting the deal of a lifetime by basically screwing you over." So be careful. Don't undercharge yourself. Find out what other people are doing. Make sure you're covering your costs, and make sure, by the way, that when you do your cost planning, always factor in your time. That is the most important thing. When you say that it's $200, it's a lot more than that. It's $200 plus however long it's going to take you to finish this job. Remember, when you're working on this job, by definition, you're not working on anything else. It's what we call an opportunity cost there, and you need to be compensated for that. If you're spending 10 hours of your life doing something for anybody, that is 10 hours of your life that you will never, ever get back from anyone ever again. Make sure that you're charging fairly for it. Steve?
Thank you, Cliff. That was a great answer, and I apologize for having the mic off for the first 15 seconds, but you covered it again, so we're in good shape. One last question from Mary Catherine. Is there a general percentage a business should budget for marketing?
Okay. Here's a short answer and then a slightly longer one. The short answer is, especially when you're first starting out, you should be devoting at least 20 to 25% of your total time on marketing activities. When you're budgeting, you have to budget time as well as money. And the easy answer to that is you should be spending at least 20, 25%, probably more with a startup business. The biggest mistake that most service businesses make, at some point they get busy. They get so busy serving their existing clients that they forget to keep their marketing going and up to date. And that's a problem. When you're doing your marketing, you're not doing it to get business today or tomorrow. You're looking to get business 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the road. You want to have a pipeline of business down the road that you can look forward to. And if you stop marketing, sooner or later, that pipeline dries up. If I stop doing these, so for example, there may be somebody on this call who's going to call me tomorrow and say, hey, Cliff, I got a problem. I need your help with something. That'd be great if it happens. But I will tell you, it very rarely happens. But what will happen, and by the way, it happens virtually every week in my practice, is I'll get a call from somebody saying, hey, Cliff, you don't know me. I'm up in Nowheresville, Massachusetts, but my sister-in-law heard you do a SCORE webinar about a year ago, and she says that you are the person to talk to. I got a problem with my business. Can you help me out? I get those calls all the time. When you're doing your marketing, you don't really know who you're reaching. You're throwing spaghetti at the wall, and you know some of it's going to stick, but that's a horrible metaphor, isn't it? It's kind of a dirty one, but you're throwing all this spaghetti at the wall, and eventually some of it's going to stick, but you can't exactly predict which strands are going to stick and which ones don't. Spend as much time as you can. In terms of, is there a general percentage of business should budget for marketing? The answer is it totally depends on the business. If your business is heavily dependent upon newspaper ads and flyers, the Valpak kinds of things, you're going to spend more than a business that does primarily social media advertising, which is much less expensive. It just depends on the nature of your business and what it is you're doing, but the short answer is as much as possible. I view marketing as one of the key expenses of any business, and frankly, I could almost say you can't really spend too much on it, to be honest with you. Obviously you can spend money on things that aren't working. So, for example, if nobody's coming to you from your Twitter account, then why should you have a Twitter account? That's not working for you, and you should cut back not only the money, but the time that you're spending updating your Twitter feed every day, because it's simply not working for you. Keep an eye on what's working and what's not working, and the things that are working, that's what you spend more on. So.
Hey, great, Cliff. Thank you for that. And if you look at your watches, we're at the top of the hour, actually a couple minutes beyond it, so we're going to stop here. And I just wanted, in closing, say, just as a reminder, we do have 2 webinars each month, and if you were on at the beginning, you know that this month, actually, we have 3. And the next topic on the 15th of August is New Things Digital with Kate Berg. And on 8/29, we're going to have a webinar entitled What Technology is Safe to Use, Where, and When. And Budley Freund will be our speaker at that event. So the 15th and the 29th, pencil it in. We'd love to have you back. Listen, thank you very much, Cliff, again, for presenting. We really appreciate it. And to those of you out there, please fill out the evaluation form when you get it via email. Maybe you've actually already gotten it. And also, please visit fairfieldcounty.score.org. We'd love to have you come to the office for one-on-one counseling as well. Have a nice day, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the summer. Bye.